Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of SoccerViza TV and the SoccerViza Podcast. I'm Christopher McCollum, Joe Funicello, here in Ísafjörður, Iceland, in the midst of wrapping up the season with the Vestri, and it was a little bit of a difficult result yesterday. Got a draw on the road after a tough couple days of traveling, so got a point. That was nice, but it kind of led us to marvel at the wonders of promotion and relegation and kind of where that fits in the grand scheme of international football, and frankly how far behind America is by not having promotion and relegation. So we're just going to talk about a few things related to that today, and so on and so forth. Kind of just see where the footballing world blows us to. But Joe, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I think you're right with how far behind, or maybe not far behind, but how much it could benefit development in the game, both for players and the sport.
Right.
I think that's, maybe it's not we're behind, but I think that us not having this relegation and promotion type system kind of limits us and puts a roof on development.
Right. No, I absolutely think so as well. No, looking at it from a developmental standpoint to kind of a motivational standpoint as well. Like when we're down to the last 5 games of the season here in Iceland. The team we're not mathematically out of promotion. It's difficult though after the results yesterday, with a draw on our end and a couple of teams above us getting a late 3 points off of injury time winners. It's going to make it a tough hill to climb for the final 5 games of the season, but there's definitely still something there to play for.
Yeah.
Because as long as we're not mathematically eliminated, there's still a chance of going up. And just thinking about that in the context of the game and how it compares to, say, NPSL or PDL or USL,
Or even NASL, MLS.
NASL, MLS, you've got the playoffs to fight for, but looking at it in the grand scheme of things, it's not quite as much at stake. And I'm sure we can argue that playoffs, tremendous amount at stake, winning the trophy, getting the pride of being the league champion. That's all well and good, but for a lower division team, going up is more important than a trophy any day of the week, because it means you get the promotion bonus, you get to go up the next tier of football in your country, exposure to bigger teams, bigger scouts, bigger competition, and it just ends up being a great benefit for the community and the team that it's in.
100%, but you can look at it from a development standpoint. These players are going to have to fight to go up, so what it does is it brings out the best in them. They're going to have to push themselves every game mentally and physically in order to get a result, and that result is so important in also their careers.
Right.
So it also makes them grow as players. They have to dig deep and do things that, are going to change the game. They're going to have to be more creative, express themselves better through the game because it matters.
Right.
So it does a lot for their personal development as players as well.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Like we can look at cases in Europe and South America and Asia where promotion relegation exists and see how it has benefited players. Like of course the everybody's favorite story from last season was Jamie Vardy moving up and up and up and up and up. Now it wasn't all through promotion. Like it wasn't that he won the league with Halifax. It wasn't that he won the league with any of the other teams that he was on, but there's the sense of being promoted from one tier to the next, which we still don't see in American soccer all that much either, seeing players jump from NPSL to USL to NASL and then to MLS. There's not that kind of upward mobility. And not to say that it's completely linked with promotion and relegation, but what it did allow for Jamie Vardy was to get eventually into a championship team that won promotion, and then he was able to showcase himself in the Premier League. And that ended up, it might not have been a scenario that would have been allowed to come if his team didn't win promotion from the championship to the Premier League to begin with. Because how many teams are willing to take a flyer on a 27-year-old, basically unproven player from the championship? How many teams in the Premier League are willing to do that? Well, now a lot more after Jamie Vardy's success last season. We see teams taking flyers on players from non-league teams just to give them a run to see if they're the same kind of talent. But up to that point, it's kind of rare, and it's because they won promotion with Leicester, and he was able to show himself in the Premier League, and it worked out well for him.
Yeah, and also, again, back to the development point. He had to find hunger and a fight because he was playing in a lower league, and I'm sure his goal at one point was to play at the highest, was and still is to play at the highest level that he could. But being in a position where if he does well and the team does well, he can be promoted, and it kind of helps him, kind of feeds into that hunger.
Right.
And I think with American players, we kind of don't even know about it because there is no promotion and relegation. It's just, yeah, let's go play, have a good season. Hopefully if I have a good season, I'm scouted.
Right.
But it would mean a lot more if they have a good season, they go up and they do it consistently, and also if they have a good season and they're fighting for something. If I can get promoted from MPSL to USL, now I'm a professional. From semi-pro, my club gets more money, I'm a professional, so my career evolves even more. So,
exactly.
It's just, from a developmental standpoint, it's huge. Now, with that being said, it is a job, it's an entertainment. It's the entertainment industry, so these teams, like these American teams, MLS, NASL, USL, they're doing well because they're not really, the MLS anyway, is doing well because they're not really losing money each year, they're gaining it. And I think, if they do a relegation promotion, then that means, let's say a team has a bad year, like a big team like New York City FC, they have a bad year, and they have spent these millions of dollars, and they go down to USL.
Right.
It's kind of crazy, but... So I can understand it. I just you can see how much it hurts our development.
From a business and a financial standpoint, promotion and relegation serves no one. It's and you look at the numbers in the Premier League now, and it's almost the majority of Premier League team owners have voted to end promotion and relegation for the Premier League because they've made so many foreign investors have come in and taken ownership of teams that they're looking like they're going to be sacrificing all the hundreds of millions of dollars they put into it if their team gets relegated. And that's, even for the super fans that most of these owners are, taking on teams because they're fans, not as realistic business ventures, which is why almost all of the teams lose money every year and the owner just keeps pumping money into it because he just loves to have a team. But even with that being the case, with them being super fans, it's still a difficult pill to swallow, knowing that your $300 million investment is going to be reduced to rubble after 2 or 3 years because of a string of poor performances that sends you down to the championship, and then from there, as what happened with Portsmouth, down to League One.
Yeah, it's also a gamble. I mean, if you have a bad year, fans stop coming to the game,
right? So
you lose on ticket sales.
So in America, in the newer league that we have with MLS, we don't have the tradition of it, and therefore there's not going to be any traction. No matter how much fans want it, there's no way it will ever happen.
It's a shame for the developmental side. I think in terms of players, I think for the game it's hit or miss. I mean, because we're growing as the sport is growing a lot in America.
Right.
So I think the MLS has done a tremendous job in terms of structuring it in a way that it's profitable and it continues to grow. But again, for the U.S. kids and the kids trying to develop, I think, or not even just kids, but men who are talented who slip through the cracks, I think it doesn't benefit them. It's difficult. Like, you could go to a good semi-pro team and be stuck there for 10 years, and it's the same kind of. It's the same in the USL and NASL. NASL, the salaries are a bit different, but let's say you're playing in the USL and you're making $1,200 a month, and you're stuck there for 10 years, where's your life going?
Right. You're basically destined to end up a coach in that team's academy if they ever get one.
Yeah, which sucks, which I think, a lot of those players in USL and ASL can definitely play in MLS, but once they're out of the system in MLS, it's just so difficult to get them back in the system. Right. You see one or two maybe make the jump back up, where there's probably, 10 to 20 who can play on those teams, but they bring in guys that, either fresh new college recruits that are drafts or some international that you never even heard of.
Right.
But he's just an international from Argentina or lower league in Croatia or whatever, Sweden, Finland. I see a lot more Icelandic, Finnish players, Swedish players in the league, and it's like, I've played in those countries. There's players in the USL that can play the top league in Sweden. Yeah, that's for sure. There's players in the USL that can play top league in Finland. So how are these players that are average players from these leagues going over to MLS and getting a check when we have talented players in our own domestic league that we're not giving a chance to?
Right. And I think it just goes to the scouting system in the United States and how it seems like when a player has been told no by one person or one team, then that's a resounding across the board no for everyone else. If he's not good enough for them, he's definitely not going to be good enough for us. so we're not going to give him a run no matter what happens over the next couple of years, how well he plays in USL, PDL, NPSL, or anything else. One team already said no to him, so that's it.
Scared
We
to
don't
take
want
a chance.
We don't want someone else's reject.
Yeah, it sucks that way. You got to see. I think good coaches, good scouts, they should scout for potential.
Right.
They shouldn't scout for immediate success. I mean, okay, you need that 100%. You need someone to come in and make an immediate impact. I get that. But you also have to scout and say, wow, look at that player, because in 2 years, his body's going to change.
Right.
In 2 years, his whole style is going to change, and he's going to be a good player. So I see that development in him. I can see his future. Instead of, oh, he's not good right now, he's not big enough, he's not strong enough. Okay, but how is his body going to change? Because your body changes at certain points in your life.
Absolutely.
And especially your game changes because your body changes. I mean, you see it with Fernando Torres.
Mm-hmm.
First came to Liverpool, he was a bit skinnier, quick, sharp, fast, very, not, I wouldn't say powerful, I would say he was, but his speed made him powerful, if that makes any sense. All of a sudden, his body changed.
Mm-hmm.
He became a little heavier up top, not overweight, but heavier.
Right.
And
he had to compensate for injury and develop another aspect of his game.
So, and that changed his whole game, and he wasn't the same player. And it's the same. I mean, when I was 18, 19, 20, I was a different player than I was at 25, 26, or now 29. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So that's what U.S. scouts should do, is scout for the future as well, potential-wise. And
that kind of brings in the idea of if a player playing well with a lower division team in the United States, let's say a player who's had a couple of standout seasons in NPSL, he's dominated NPSL at 25, 24, 25, 26 years old, and recognizes that his window is getting smaller for making a jump to a higher league. So let's say he attracts the attention of a team in, say, Denmark, first or second division in Denmark. Not the top tier, but still full-time football underneath the Brøndbys and the Aalborgs of the world. But he's not the same type of player anymore when he was 24 years old and he was more physically dominant over his opposition on the field. Now he's got 3 hard seasons under his belt. His knees are not quite the same. His ankles are not quite the same. His muscles don't recover quite as quickly. Like, a player has to develop different aspects of his game in order to accommodate his changing body. So now, all of a sudden, he has to figure out what he has to do in order to continue succeeding in Europe. So how does a player wrap his head mentally around the fact that it is physically impossible for him to be the same player he was when he considered himself to be at his peak? How does he change to it?
I don't think a lot of players realize that, though. I don't think they take a step back. I think their career, they're so worried about their career that they don't take a step back and say, well, my body changes and I have to do these things in order to make my career live on. Right. You know what I mean? But how do they deal with it is basically, sensing how their body's changing. You can sense it, like your knees, how they feel after a game, or what, testing your 40 time. Something as simple as that. Are you as quick? Can you get quicker? Mm-hmm. Does it take you longer to see results? You know what I mean? Are you heavier? Is it harder for you to shed weight? You know what I mean? These type of things, if you sit there and analyze yourself, you can say, okay, my body's changing. This is what I need to adapt to my game now that my body's changing. I think that, the Italians do it very well.
Yeah.
I think because you have De Rossi, Totti, Pirlo, Buffon, given they play in a league that allows it. It's not as physical and it's not as demanding on their body as the English Premier League or even say an American League where we have a lot of athletes.
Right.
But they see the changes in their body and they adjust to it.
Right. So that being said, there's such a focus on athlete first, footballer second in the United States, and we have these conversations with players, coaches, scouts, and we can get into arguments, debates, fights, whatever we want to for days on end, and it all comes down to opinion. And one person's opinion is frankly no more valid than anyone else's opinion. It just depends on whether or not it's popular at the time. And of course, that person could have influence to make decisions. But nevertheless, as we say, football is a game of opinions. And right now, the trend in American soccer, as well as in a lot of Western Europe now, is taking bigger, faster, stronger athletes, and then hoping they can develop a technical aspect to their game to go along with their physical prowess.
Do they hope they can develop a technical side, or do they not care and say the game has changed to more of a direct style of play?
Maybe so.
And we just need this type of player. Because I think nowadays coaches at the professional level, I could be there, they're not worried about development so much because they're so focused on results. And I think there's only a certain amount of clubs that have put their youth system in order to develop. You know what I mean?
Right.
The kids. So I think, in my opinion, it's a game of opinions, is teams at the professional level are scouting for these athletes because the game has changed and it's more direct.
Right. But that brings us to the next progression of that question. If scouts are increasingly focused on bringing in this type of player, which we know that they are because we see the roster every year, happens every season. A roster used to be made up of 1 or 2 athletes, and 3 or 4 athletes, 4 or 5 athletes. They start figuring out how to plug athletes into every position on the field. Used to be athletic center backs. You can get up and jump higher than anyone else and clear out headers. Have an athletic center back, an athletic target striker, and everyone else kind of plays football. But now the whole spine, they want to be athletes, and you want to put athletes on the wings, and now you want athlete wing backs. So it's getting to the point where all 10 field players, they're wanting to be an athlete.
Majority of teams, yes.
Right.
Majority.
And then, of course, you look at the goalkeeper trends as well. Want them bigger, bigger, and bigger, and bigger. To the point where in some leagues, if you're under 6'2", you're not going to have a chance.
I mean, look at Mourinho, what he said about Mata. I had to change him because he was too small.
Right.
And Mourinho said that.
Right.
Who's a guy who comes from a country where most people are not the biggest footballers in the world, you know what I mean? So,
but does all of this kind of is it prophetic for the end of footballers in general? And the reason I say that is because if teams are leaning this way to such a strong degree, and that's not to say there's not going to be a correction in the market, because there might end up being a correction at some point where we reach critical mass of having 22 athletes on the field and they're just toe balling it from end to end. And somebody, a Mourinho or a Guardiola or someone, is going to finally take a step back and say, all right, everybody slow down. Let's put some logic and some sense back into it and start plugging in.
But he needs to get results. See, here's the thing. The English Premier League, the most watched league in the world, the most money in the world, spend the most in the world. All the other leagues started dying out. Right. They had financial crisis. Their countries had financial crisis, and they started dying out. So here's these English teams that were bringing in a small amount of foreigners, right? And had English players who, nothing wrong with it, it's their style.
Right.
It's a game of opinions, and that's how they play, who had a direct style, who had an up and down, box to box style, whip it into the box, get on the end of it, get up, fight for it. So these leagues all started falling apart, and the English Premier League started rising. And in America, we started watching more and more of the EPL.
Right.
And you see it with generations, because my generation, Serie A was big. The EPL was on TV, but Serie A was really what you watched, or the Spanish football, because you didn't have these networks didn't have deals with the EPL yet.
Right.
Do you get what I mean?
Right.
So my generation growing up my dad watched Serie A on the Italian channel, and I'm sure the same with other foreign parents, or the game was more evolved around the Italian league because Serie A was huge,
right? Or
Barcelona, or you know what I mean?
Right. You've got Telemundo, Galavision, and Univision watching.
And it wasn't that the
Argentinian games.
It wasn't that the EPL wasn't big. It was
right.
just they didn't strike a deal with any of the networks yet to stream it to America. You know, so all of a sudden, all these other leagues started falling out. The English league started growing. Foreign players came in. It was still direct, and all of a sudden, it's the most exciting, the best league in the world, and football changed.
Right.
I'm a strong believer in that.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. Now, am I a big fan of English football? No, but at the end of the day, that's my opinion. The world loves it. It's exciting. It's entertaining to them.
Sure.
So coaches coming up watch that league and say, how is football being played in that league? And these are the type of players we want. So that echoes all over football.
Sure.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. But the question is, by increasingly focusing on that style of football, is that eventually going to make the average age of a team younger and younger and younger, and players are forced to recognize that they've got a shorter shelf life than they used to have? Because all of a sudden, when they reach 28, 29 years old, they're no longer in the prime of their career as it used to be considered. Your peak as a center midfielder or as a supporting striker was to be 27 to 30, 31 years old. That was your peak.
How old is Wayne Rooney right now?
I don't know, how old is Wayne Rooney?
Let me look
32?
that up right now, actually.
I think he's the same age as us, isn't he?
And this is a good point that you just brought up, because if he is, let's see, Wayne Rooney is 30 years old.
Our age, yeah.
So now look at this. Now, Beckham played till what age?
37.
Pirlo's still playing, right? Maldini played to a late age.
And
Totti. Now, this guy is very talented.
Right.
But because of the way football has changed, he's not as dominant as he was in his early.
Right.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So
you can arguably say that he was more dominant as a 19 and 20-year-old than he was as a 27, 28-year-old.
And he's still a world-class player.
Sure.
But he's not having the same impact as he did when
Right.
he first came to United. Now, you can blame that on playing styles or whatever, but you can see that he's different.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's from a different era.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, football's changed. I think it does. Unless something happens like you can't get working permits to work in England or something like that, and the league starts to go down and the Serie A starts to rise again, or let's say the money moves to the MLS. Oh, if it moves to MLS, I think the style should stay.
Right.
But it goes to Spain or it goes to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
You won't see that big change in development. It will take it will take time, but it will. Unless that happens, development will stay the same. They'll look for these type of players. They'll scout for these type of players.
Right.
So, to answer your question, I think yes, it changes the shelf life.
Yeah.
Younger players are more wanted because in their prime they're more athletic. They're
Right.
more, and it's a shame for someone like Wayne Rooney because maybe he has to go play at a lower level at a younger age.
Right.
Like,
there's no more Paul Scholes of the world, no more Ryan Giggs. We've talked about that until we're blue in the face. That this current generation of footballers, there's not a Ryan Giggs among them. There's not a Paul Scholes among them. There's nobody who's set.
There's a Pogba.
There's a Pogba.
There's a Pogba, 6 foot. I mean, how tall are they? 6'5", 6'6", maybe.
He's not that tall.
Yeah, he has to.
No, I don't think so. He's just skinny, so he looks tall.
Let's see how tall he is.
Pogba's
191. What's
that's
that?
6'3".
6'3". Okay, it's pretty big though. I mean, for a normal size footballer.
It's only a little bit taller than me.
But I mean, this guy just can do. He's got amazing feet.
Right.
He can turn you, body you, jump, win headers, tackle. He can do all that, and you weren't used to seeing players that big do those type of things. You know what I mean? It's kind of like basketball. LeBron James was back in the day. LeBron James was a power forward / maybe a number 3.
Right.
But now he can run the point if he really has to.
Right.
Do you get what I mean? So it's crazy to see how all sports, how we've changed.
Right. It reminds me of something that Charles Barkley said on a halftime show one time. It was when Vince Carter was his first season with Dallas, and Vince went up and he had an old Vince Carter style dunk on a fast break. And they were saying in the booth, didn't know that Vince still had it in him because he usually doesn't dunk that much anymore. Or he'll go up for a light one-handed dunk. He's not going to go up and all Vince-sanity. And Barkley says, and Charles Barkley, and he's one of my favorite sports personalities. I love Chuck. He used to come into the bar that I worked in New York City. We've got pictures together. And he said, the thing with basketball players is if you go up for a layup today, save yourself for a dunk tomorrow because you only have so many dunks in your knees. And the same thing can be applied to soccer players. When you're running 11, 12, 13, 15 kilometers a game in a pure athletic style, pure end-to-end, then eventually your body's going to wear out. Yeah. So, and this goes to the whole issue of the shortening shelf life of footballers that we're talking about the theory of right now, because it used to be that you didn't move around quite as much. And footballers have always been known as having the best fitness of any of the major sports. But now we're running more and more. The midfielders are running more and more. Wingers are running more and more. And eventually that's going to take a toll on the body. Yeah. Once again, even
in your coaching courses. You take coaching courses, you go get your UEFA A or your A license. A lot of the coaches are running more drills where it's how can we get forward? I mean, it's the point of the game. How can we get forward?
Right.
Where I think before it was how can we keep it and then get forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it is changing the shelf life.
Yeah. So that brings us to what can players do in order to evolve?
Adapt.
Because
you have to adapt. You have to get in there. You have to study the game, understand how it's changing, and change your game to suit it. You know, a lot of players come to the combine and they're like, "Well, I'm more technical. Look, I read the game better." It's like, yeah, but what if that coach scouting you right there understands you better than that, but you're not going to make it in his league because you're not going to have time on the ball.
right.
Do you know what I mean? And I think players, they look at their skill level and they say, "Right, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, but you got to fit into a puzzle.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're good or not. Can you fit in the puzzle? Because you could be better than that center mid technically, but he works, makes tackles, and win headers, and that's what that guy's looking for.
Right.
And the game has changed to that. Do you get what I mean? So, you know, you look at Will Daniels, who we got from Quinnipiac now, who plays for Grindavik. He fits this league perfectly.
It does.
Where there's other players who might be a little better technically, nothing against Will's technical abilities because he's great too, but his size, his speed, his pace, the way he can do things with the ball with power
Mm-hmm.
is more attractive than someone who's maybe a little more technically sound than him.
Right.
So
He's a player who does incredibly well in this environment that requires strength, that requires power, and he's able to. What I marvel about with Will is that he's been able to make himself bigger, faster, and stronger than he was when we first met him a few years ago. But at the same time, and that would have been enough for him to be semi-successful in Iceland, making himself bigger, more powerful, making himself stronger and faster, able to jump higher, because that would allow him to hold his place, hold his place physically on the field as a target striker. But what he did was he was able to maintain his flexibility, his agility by working in a number of different exercise routines, and that's helped him remain flexible and going with his finesse on the ball, which he's developed both feet now. And he can strike the ball with his left foot and his right foot. That was one of the big things about Grindavik bringing him in, was they wanted to develop both of his feet to be equally good. And we saw his goal against Fram last month. It was a cracker of a left-footed shot from 20 yards out, which he may not have been able to do in prior
he
seasons.
evolved.
He evolved.
Exactly. He adapted
To make himself superior, because he developed the physical tools, but he developed the technical tools to go along with
now
it.
he's one of the best attacking players in that league.
Right. And that's why we see Pogba as the complete package that he is. A package perhaps that nobody has ever seen in this game before. And that's why Mourinho says we've got a player who is better than anyone else in 3 different positions on the field. He can play as a 10, an 8, or a 6, because he's got the size to be physically dominant on the defensive end. He's got the endurance to go box to box, and he's got the creativity to be a playmaker.
Sure. And size to.
So Will Daniels is no longer the white Drogba; he's the white Pogba.
It's true. The game has changed, and you have to evolve with it. And I think a lot of players don't realize that. They look at their skill set and say, "Well, my skill set's fine." Yes, your skill set's fine, but it still has to fit into a certain type of football, a certain type of soccer.
Right.
So there might be times in a game where your skill set gets you through, but there might be times in a game where you're going to have to feel out of your comfort zone in order to get a result or make a tackle or do something. You know what I mean? And it depends what league you're playing as well, but especially in the lower leagues and places where you're trying to prove yourself, they're more direct. So.
Sure. Right, so we've talked about the promotion and relegation issues. We've talked about the development of players and this development of the game and how players must tactically and physically evolve to fit within the changing aspects that are regarded as important.
And then in anything, you always change. You have to change. You have to.
And change is inevitable.
Yes,
you have to.
100%. As a player, as an industry, as a person.
Right.
It's important.
And now it really is survival of the fittest, and multiple senses of the word at this point, survival of the fittest when it comes to football. So as we're going into the opening stages of the winter transfer window, we've got 3 ID camps coming up in October, with the first regional showcase coming up in November. So with all of these things in mind, like, what can players kind of look forward to with the opening of the winter window? Well, we've primarily moved players to Scandinavia during the winter window before, and we're seeing the game isn't changing as quickly in Scandinavia as it is in some parts of the world. It's still, obviously there's an importance held on physicality here, but for players who are not used to the Scandinavian style, let's say we have a team from Sweden coming to the showcase, and they're going to want to take a couple players back with them. What can a player like that, or what can a player expect going to a league like the Swedish Superettan, the
I
second
mean, don't
tier
get
in
me wrong, it's
Sweden?
still pretty physical because, again, a lot of these coaches and a lot of these players, and they watch the EPL and they want to get forward and they want to express themselves, and they're more worried about getting results, and so are the coaches.
Mhm.
But the league isn't as physically demanding because, you know, it is a different style. So in a country like Sweden, you can still find players that want to keep the ball, and that, you know, teams that worry about keeping the ball first, you know what I mean, and getting forward second. So it's not as demanding, but it's, at the end of the day, they all look up to the mecca of soccer, which is the EPL, and a lot of the game has changed and evolved into that. So,
Right.
you know, you see it with players nowadays. Like, even now, coaching, I've had to evolve coaching,
Mhm.
the way I scout, because I wanted to bring in a bunch of footballers, and it's like, yeah, if I brought in a bunch of footballers, great, but I need to bring in footballers with a bit of, you know, nastiness to them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because, and that's an issue, because you look at some players and you're like, he can play,
Mhm.
but will he fit into this league? And I think coaching has made me evolve as a scout. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
So,
Of course. So, in the final thoughts on promotion and relegation, it's not just Vestry in promotion battle right now. Will Daniels in a promotion fight with Grindavik right now. They're finally starting to stretch out their lead in the first division of Iceland. They've got a 4 or 5 point advantage now with 5 games left in the season. So looking very good for them to win the first division and get promotion up to the Pepsi, which would be fantastic for Will. Caroline Murray over in Finland and the Ukkonen in Finland women's second tier professional play. Unfortunate result today. Took a loss, and that put a hit to their promotion run. But they've got 7 games left, and they're still only 8 points back. So definitely possible at the time there. Tony Holterman put in a very good performance today, and Nordvland won the game 3-1 over Norra BK and Sweden's 5th tier. So good job, Tony, collecting another win for the season, and that puts them right back to the top of Division 4 in Sweden. So they've got 7 games left in the season. Looks like they're going to go up also. Kinaese with North Geelong Warriors out in Australia. 0-0 result yesterday. Very similar in terms of results as what we faced. They needed a win to stay on pace, being a point back in the standings, and the top team goes up. Got a draw, top team got a win, so now there's space between them with only 2 games left in the season, a 4-point gap with 2 games left to play. So it's going to be pretty tough, pretty tough there. Gabriel Wers with Jazz and Finland's Ukkonen. That's still a tumbling ship. Jazz is. They've needed results but haven't been able to pull them off over recent weeks, so it's not looking good there. For Mateus Brella with GBK Kokkola and the Kakkonen. Still in the race, about 6 point separation out of promotion right now. So there's a lot of players who have come through SoccerViza who are fighting in their own promotion relegation battles right now, and they're seeing at firsthand the absolute thrill of survival. And it kind of just makes me wonder for the players who choose to stay in America. Not that there's anything wrong with staying in America and playing in PSL or PDL or USL, to each their own. But there's a certain element, an aspect of the game that you're simply never going to have there, that you're never going to experience. You're never going to be able to walk off the field and see the absolute downcast expressions of those in the stands, knowing that, well, it's not this year. Now we have to wait until next year, or even worse, we're going down this year, and that's going to hurt this team in ways that we might not be able to recover from. And kind of all or nothing gamble. They're also not going to be able to walk off the field as Will Daniels is doing every week now with Grindavik, seeing fans staying longer and longer, cheering louder and louder after the game is over with, knowing that they're going up to the top flight. That kind of upward mobility is simply not available in the United States. And it makes me wonder if a player was able to get a taste of that, a player who's happy with staying in the United States, if he was able to get a taste of that, if it would change his perceptions on whether or not he was willing to travel.
definitely it would. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's one of those things where if you have to experience it to understand it.
Right. So, yeah. But anyway, I think that brings this episode to a close.